This video talks about objects. What exactly is an object? An object is anything that we might want to know something about in order to solve a computer problem. For example, a desk could be an object, a computer could be an object, a student could be an object, an instructor could be an object. Anything can be an object. The important part is that we have data and properties and methods that work on that data. So we have data and we have actions that take place within the same thing, which we call an object. Now, we use something called classes to build objects, and we'll talk about that later. We're already used to objects. We have worked with objects all term from the very moment that we put our first label on our form, from the moment that we have our first form. A form's an object, a label's an object, a text box is an object. Now there are certain types of objects that are visible or created by Visual Studio, created by Microsoft through Visual Studio to help us in our work. These normally we call controls. All controls are types of objects. The only thing that's going to be different now is that now we are getting to build our objects, which will make code reuse an awful lot easier. Now, the principle behind the object is this, that we have data that's private within our object. So let's say that the circle is our object, this rectangle inside is a data, and that's private. It's protected from the outside world. The only way it can get to the outside world is through properties and methods. Now, this isn't the only way to build objects, and you'll notice in your book some other ways. But this is the principle that we're going to subscribe to in this class because it allows us to keep our data secure. And that's the most important thing. We want to be sure that our data is kept securely. Now, there's another topic related to objects, and that's called UML class diagrams. So a class is like a template for an object, and an object is called an instance. So an object is an instance, of a class. So this is a very important keyword here, instance. So an object is an instance of a class. So let's look at these UML class diagrams. Here's the general layout of a UML class diagram. We have the name of the object up above. We have properties in the middle and methods down below. Now, when we have properties, we are always going to give them a type. So here we have a student class that has a name that's an integer, a name that's a string, a midterm that's an integer, and a final that's an integer. These are required when we declare properties. This is not required, however in this case we have given it a type. And this tells us that here we have a method and it's a value returning method, and the type of method that it returns is a string. If we don't have this, it's going to be a void method. So for example, if we just had something like this, grade without a qualifier, that would make it a void method. But we're going to use it as a value returning method. So now the point is, or the next thing that we're going to talk about is, how do I go from this UML class diagram to creating a class in Visual Studio? So I've started up a project, and to create a class, this is what we do. We go up here to project, and we say add a class. Okay? And then we type in the name of the class, and we get the name of the class from the UML class diagram. The name of the class is student. So we'll just type in the name student, and we will click add. That creates the student class for us. Very good, isn't it? All right, so the next thing we want to do is create the properties and the methods that are associated with the class. Okay, so we're going to have a name, midterm, and final properties. So we have those three properties. So to create those properties, what we're going to do, because remember that our idea is that we want to keep our data private, is we're going to have three private, these are called either backing fields or instance variables, that allow us to keep our data private. So we're going to say private, and then our standard for the class is to put an underscore in front of all of these backing fields or instance variables. So we'll say private, this is private string underscore name. Okay. Then the next one is private private int underscore midterm, and private int underscore final. This is our standard, because we want to have things have the same sort of name, but we want to be able to readily distinguish between our so these are our backing fields. We want to be able to readily distinguish between our backing fields names, and sometimes in some of the literature they'll be called instance variables. Okay, so now that we have that, let's declare a property. Now, a property, remember, is our way of getting in between the outside world and our private data. So our properties and our methods are going to be public. I'm not saying that we can't have private properties and methods, but we're going to start out with public properties and methods all the time. So I'm going to say public, and then I give it the type of variable of property that it is, which is string, and then I give the name of the property, and in this case it's name. So I say name, and then I have I put in my braces. Now, important inside a property, we have to have two things. We have to have two things that are called accessors. One is a get accessor, and one is a set accessor. Both of them are pretty simple, at least at this particular point in time. So a get accessor is going to be a function, and so we're just going to say return, and then we're going to return our backing field or our instance variable, and of course we'll need to put a semicolon at the end. Now a set, once again, we're keeping it simple right now. It doesn't have to be this simple, and in the future will not be this simple, but we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to say underscore name, and we're going to be saying equals and value. Okay, value is a key word in C# that just says, and you notice we don't have any reference to it, but it hasn't given us oops, and of course the always present semicolon, but it hasn't given us an error. That's because it's a key word, and it just means that when I assign a value to name, that's what gets passed in here. We'll see how that works in another video. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to create another variable, another property. And once again, this is going to be public. And we're going to look over here to see the next one is called midterm, and it's an integer. And so this will be public int midterm. Once again, we put in the semicolon, and we put in our getters and our setters. So a get, remember, is a function, and it will always return a value. And here we want it to return underscore midterm, put our semicolon at the end, and then we'll need a set. Once again, these are called accessors. The gets and sets are accessors, and you'll notice that they follow in this pattern that we've established. Okay, so this is as far as we'll take you in this video. The next video we'll talk about defining a method. I'll leave it up to you to put in the next property, to define the next property. It should be pretty simple. If you're uncertain as to how to get it, you'll see it at the beginning of the next video.